I am the author of the book Helplessness, the emotional health challenges brothers experience after we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. This is from a brother's perspective.
So give us a little background on how you got started in your journey a little bit before we get into some of the other topics.
The next thing you know, Gypsy, we are singing in after hour nightclubs all over Los Angeles. I mean, it was amazing. We'd be singing at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. We'd get up the next day, go to school, repeat. Our life was sing, rehearse, go to school, get up, and repeat. That was it.
Welcome to American Gypsy Podcast. I'm your host, Gypsy, and today I have a special guest, Keeper Whitney. He is the author of Helplessness and host of This Is for the Brothers podcast, a musician and advocate for sexual abuse victims. Um, Welcome to the show, Keeper.
Gypsy, thanks for having me. It is an absolute honor. I've seen some of your other uh, podcasts, and they're beautifully done. Absolutely spectacular. So, like I said, it's an honor, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, and glad to have you here. So, give us a little background on how you got started in your journey a little bit before we get into some of the other topics.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. As you said, I am the author of the book Helplessness, the emotional health challenges brothers experience after we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. Now, before we go any further, I'm sure Gypsy will agree with me and echo this. This is a very sensitive topic. It
Yes.
could be very triggering for a number of you. If you need to back away, by all means, do so. If you need to just pull back, you need to shut it down, by all means, do so. Protect yourself. Gypsy's podcast, this episode will be around. You can always come back to it. But what we're going to be talking about primarily is child sexual abuse. And and as Gypsy said, my family has experience in this. So let me just jump right into it.
Sure.
So,
Thank you
Gypsy,
for the, sorry to interrupt. Thank you for the disclaimer. I was going to touch on that before we got started.
yeah, it's just something that I'm just used to doing
Yeah.
because oftentimes people want to get into the conversation. And so uh, I'm sure you were going to be in full agreement with it.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm the author of the book Helplessness, the emotional health challenges that brothers experience once we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. Understand this is from a brother's perspective, okay? And it is quite possibly the very first book of its kind. Me and my team have not been able to find anything that even touches on what brothers emotionally go through once we learn about it. So you wanted to know how all this happened, how all this came about. In 1971, my family, we were incredibly poor. We could not afford an 80 or $90 a month rent. In fact, we moved so much, I lived in 21 different places before I moved out. I've been homeless 3 times during that entire time, not having anywhere to live. I'm very familiar with government cheese and rice and all this sort of stuff, and obviously food stamps and living amongst rats and roaches and all this. I went to 11 grade schools before I graduated high school. And so abject poverty is not foreign to me. But in 1971, as we were struggling, my mother and my aunt, uncle decided to form a singing group, and they were amazing, absolutely fantastic. But as good as they were, they could not make enough money to make ends meet. And 1971 was also the time Michael Jackson and Jackson 5, they were blowing up globally. I mean, they were everywhere. It was the phenomenon that never ended. You know, on the airways, you'd hear ABC, Who's Loving You? I Want You Back. I mean, it was everywhere. And obviously, being kids around the same age, we would sing around the house thinking we were the Jackson 5. And since we were struggling, my mother came up with the idea and asked us, would you kids like to sing? Because if we could sing, we could make more money as a singing family. The next thing you know, the Whitney family was born. Me and my seven brothers and sisters, I am number two of four boys and four girls. I'm the second oldest. The next thing you know, Gypsy, we are singing in after hour nightclubs all over Los Angeles. I mean, it was amazing. We be singing at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. We get up the next day, go to school, repeat. Our life was sing, rehearse, go to school, get up, and repeat. That was it. My mother had all eight of her kids by the time she was 24. And so she got pregnant at 16, and we were incredibly tight as just a family, just as brothers and sisters. It was always like that. So one afternoon on a Saturday, we are singing, we are rehearsing, getting ready for the gig that night. And the phone rings. My mother walks over to the phone. She picks it up. Hello? Who? And she turns and looks at us and says, Michael Jackson's on the phone. Yeah, that Michael Jackson, soon to be king of pop, is on the phone calling our house. I mean, we are poor. Why is he calling our house? How did he even get our number? My mother then says to my brother directly under me, child number four, he wants to talk to you. So my brother picks up the telephone. Hello? Uh huh. Shortly, he hangs up the phone and screams, Michael Jackson said he's heard of us. Said he's heard I sing and dance just like him. For us to keep going, we will get there someday. As I said, we were very poor, but I asked you, Gypsy, what poor kid could not dream of a fabulous life after that? That is all the motivation we would need, anyone would need. It's like, oh my gosh, Michael Jackson. Jump cut 6 years later, 1977. We are everywhere. Concerts, magazines, TV shows. We're with United Artists Records at that time. In fact, that year, we made the coveted Billboard's Top 100 not once, not twice, but three times. Two singles and an album. I like to say everything we touched that year turned to gold. 1977 was also the year Motown had just completed their exhaustive 3 year search to replace Michael Jackson and Jackson 5, who they had lost to Epic Records 3 years earlier. Guess who they chose? My family. Where the Jackson 5 had one Michael Jackson, we had eight. All eight of us sang lead. All eight of us did backup. All eight of us danced. Me and my brothers all played instruments. We did everything. In fact, Suzanne DePass, who discovered the Jackson 5 in Gary, Indiana, is the one who discovered us and is walking us through the door. We are about to sign the largest new artist contract Motown offered any group ever, larger than the Supremes, larger than the Four Tops, larger than the Temptations, larger than Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, larger than Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. They had created all the pilot TV show. In fact, I have the pilot episode script in my office right now. It's called At Wits End. We were gone. I like to say the bus was outside, the engine was running, the seats are warm, the doors open. All we had to do was step onto the bus and we were gone. Fame and fortune, Michael Jackson's words were about to come to fruition. It was a crazy time to think that we were about to become famous and wealthy in a matter of minutes, or better yet, days. See, the upcoming Thursday or Friday was going to be the day we signed the contract. We're all excited, me and my brothers and sisters. Everything is just falling into place. So the Saturday prior to the Thursday and Friday, my sister screams upstairs, my oldest sister, child number three, boys, come downstairs, family meeting. We all come running downstairs. This is it. I'm about to learn if it's Thursday or Friday. As I go into the living room, there's an archway that is the entrance. It's a rounded archway. As I go into the living room, you see my oldest sister is pacing back and forth across the archway. And she's pissed. She is mad. That wasn't all that odd because she and my mother could be at each other, you know? So it's like, okay, I guess they were doing something because earlier that day, my four sisters were going in and out of bedrooms, and you could hear arguing taking place. And from time to time, we could hear my mother's voice. So she was part of it. They would go in one bedroom. A few minutes later, a door would slam. They'd been in another bedroom. They would squeeze into a bathroom, and you could hear raised voices. You just couldn't make it out. But it was like angry bees. They were at each other. So I'm thinking, okay, my older sister is still upset. But as I said, I walked into the living room, and there was a couch to the right of me. And at the far end of the couch are my three youngest sisters, the three youngest of us eight. In fact, the two youngest are twins. They're not saying a word, which was really odd because my younger sisters never stopped talking. I mean, they were laughing, they teased everyone, they were joking all the time. In fact, that's what we were as a family. That happened all the time. So that's not uncommon. But to see them at the end of the couch, not talking, in fact, huddled together, huh. At the opposite end of the couch are my two youngest brothers. They're also quiet, but they are like me. They don't know what my oldest sister is doing. Why is she going back and forth? Why aren't the baby girls, which what we call our three youngest sisters, why aren't the baby girls saying anything? Do they know what's about to happen? Do they know our life is about to change? No more rats and roaches and any manner of things. We can go out and buy furniture for a change instead of going out into lots, bringing furniture into the house. We can actually get furniture. But there they were, quiet. My two youngest brothers, I'm looking, they're looking at me like, oh, okay. At the far end of the couch where the baby girls were, my oldest brother is standing. And I lock eyes on him. We don't know.
And how old were you at this point?
At this time, I'm about 16, maybe 17.
Okay.
So I go take a seat on the couch between my three youngest sisters and my two youngest brothers. And within seconds after I enter, my mother and stepfather walk into the living room. We have a brown recliner in the living room that clashes violently with this green carpet. They just didn't match. But when you're out just trying to get furniture and you're scrounging the streets of the neighborhood, you're taking whatever you can get, And so we had a brown recliner. So my stepfather goes and he sits down in the recliner, Gypsy, and he immediately does this. And I'm thinking, what the hell? My younger brothers, they don't know what's going on. My oldest brother doesn't know what's going on. I'm like, what's going on here? My mother, who is usually bubbly like her children, effervescent, full of energy, full of life, is not saying a word. She just got this stoic look on her face. But you can see in her eyes, she's angry about something. She walks to the living room and stands in front of the plate glass window that overlooks outside. And she turns around and looks at her seven children sitting and my older brother at the far end. He doesn't say a word. She looks at my oldest sister, who's still pacing back and forth, and she is looking daggers at her. She is looking as though she is ready to kill. I don't know what's going on. Now, I live in California, Southern California, so we get earthquakes all the time. I mean, freeways are broken, they're cracked, and trees are uprooted. Homes, in fact, are earthquakes happen all the time. In fact, we had a couple last week. It's no big deal. 4.5, 5.0. Okay, we're so accustomed to these. Now, those are material earthquakes. Those things can be put back together. A freeway, rebar, concrete, a house, hammer, nails, spit, gum, you name it, slap, pop, 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 roads repaired, pop, 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 asphalt, whatever, done. But emotional earthquakes, that's a completely different matter. To come back from an emotional earthquake is almost impossible. It requires a lot of support. It requires a lot of patience. My Me and my three brothers are about to be hit with three emotional earthquakes in a 10-minute span. Three emotional earthquakes that will utterly destroy us. My mother still hadn't said a word, and my stepfather is still hands in his face. My older brother and my younger brother didn't know it, but we are about to hear the words no brother ever expects to hear. The words no brother could ever prepare for. My mother finally speaks and drops earthquake number one. Your stepfather has been molesting your sisters for years. Wait a minute. What did you say? What? No, no, no. Wait a minute. What did you say? He has been doing what to who? I am dropping emotionally, Gypsy. I am falling into a void of emotional turmoil and chaos and just fear and anxiety. I am just falling into this void. My comprehension was really slow on the uptake. But what I did here was apartment building, liquor store, park. It just wasn't fitting. It just wasn't making any sense. Not us. Amongst our family and friends and those who would come to see us, we were the perfect family. There was nothing we could do wrong. Everything we touched was perfect. Just about everyone we knew wanted to be in our family. Kids, adults, they wanted to be a part of us. They wanted to be around us. And now to hear that our stepfather has been molesting our oldest and my younger sisters for years. And my stepfather's 6'6", 250 pounds. And when he wears his Afro wig, his height is over 7 feet tall. And my sisters, what are you talking about? The earthquake is breaking the house. The cracks have already started to form. My mother then drops earthquake number two. I have known all along. Wait, you have known what all along? You have known what all along? You have betrayed our sisters? We came to find out later that it started in 1971, the year we started singing, the year Michael Jackson called our house. So this has been going on for 6 years. And me and my brothers had no idea. We have no no clue as to what has been going on. In fact, the meeting that morning between my sisters and my mother's was to discuss telling the boys today. We are telling the boys before we sign this contract with Motown, they need to know what is going on. That's what was happening in these closed door meetings all morning. I don't know what to do. My brothers don't know what to do. My little sisters are in fear. They are scared. My oldest sister is still pacing, and my mother looks at her. And if looks could kill, either side would have killed the other. Now, I said there were three earthquakes that hit us, me and my brothers, in a 10-minute span. Earthquake number three would be the one that would break us for about 45 years. The devastation of the first two, there is absolutely no escaping the importance and the emotional trauma that my sisters have experienced. Because even though they have experienced all of this, they have learned, unfortunately, how to navigate it, how to get up and go to school, how to continue being sisters around their brothers, how to get on stage and sing. Their emotional regulation and things they needed to do to protect themselves, they've been working on this, unfortunately, for 6 years. Making sure their brothers don't know because of the threat by my stepfather and my mother. If you tell them, we will hurt you. If you tell them, we will hurt them. If you tell them, you will always be poor. You will never get out of this situation. Carrots like that and threats like that. And so for me and my brothers, this is our first time hearing about it. And so we have no way to emotionally regulate what is going on because we were being hit with all of it, so much of it all at once. Earthquake number three, my oldest sister, child number three, stops walking and turns around and points a finger at her brothers and says, "You can't talk about it. It didn't happen to you. It only happened to us girls. You can't talk about it ever." And like that, relationships between brothers and sisters that were so incredibly tight lay on the living room floor broken. My brothers and I don't know what to do. We are utterly and figuratively paralyzed. What do we do with this? How do we handle this? The shock and the dismay and the guilt and things like self blame and anger and betrayal is overwhelming us. It is my belief that if you're a brother and you have sisters, what that means is your job is to protect their honor. That's what it means to be a brother, to protect the honor of your sisters. If you're a brother with sisters, you have to do that. But when our sister told us we can't do anything, do not bring it up, do not act. It didn't happen to you. What she didn't realize, because she's younger than us, and I get it, but though she didn't realize it did happen to us. It had been happening to us all along. We just didn't know about it because if one member of the family is sexually abused, the entire family is sexually abused. That's just the way it is. But it did go a long way, Gypsy, into explaining. From time to time, we'd have a conversation with our sisters, or we'd watch a TV show, or some would tell a joke, or someone would do something, and their response did not match what we were saying, what we were watching, what we were doing. It just didn't match. But it wasn't until years later, after I started writing Helplessness, that I understood all along they were protecting themselves. In fact, that's what my oldest sister was doing when she told us boys we can't say anything. She's protecting herself. She's protecting her little sisters as she should. But the fact remains, my brothers and I are now victims. Oftentimes, when I speak at events and things, I tell my story, and invariably there will be a woman who will say to me, "Your sister is absolutely right. You can't talk about it because it didn't happen to you." And I will say, "Well, the story that you're hearing, it didn't happen to us directly, but indirectly, we are victims." But let me just add this. 6 years before my sisters were sexually abused in 1965, my older brother and I were sexually abused almost daily by our babysitter for 6 months. So I do know what it means to be a direct victim. And then the response will be, oh, I didn't know. So you do understand. And I say, yes, I understand both sides of the child sexual abuse coin. I understand what it means to be the direct victim, and I understand what it means to be an indirect victim as a brother. When brothers hear this, our our guilt and shame starts to wash over us because we start to say, how is it that we did not know? Fear and anxiety, confusion and crisis, depression, isolation really starts to happen. But one of the things that when we were told we couldn't talk about it by our sisters, and these are the people we needed to speak to the most. These are the people who could help us not only understand, but help us heal. And we are the people who could help them. It just so happened that because of gender proximity to our stepfather, what's between his legs is between ours. My sister felt we, in some way, were as guilty because we're the same gender. And if you look back historically, that makes a lot of sense because what men have done to women when it comes to sexual abuse, men and women and girls, it has gone on since the beginning of humanity. And yes, by all means, women have to protect themselves. At the same time, understanding that there are collateral victims. There are victims whose voices need to be heard. One of the things that you and I talked about, Gypsy, before we got going was, and you were absolutely correct. You once the exposure happens, you hear about the victims, you hear about the predator, you hear invariably about the people who empower, which would be my mother, the predator would be my stepdad, and obviously the victims would be my sister, but no one ever asks about the brothers. It's as if we are inconvenient truth. We are taboo. Our feelings don't matter. So when we're told we can't talk about it, that's exactly what it felt like. My feelings didn't matter. My voice didn't matter. I didn't matter. And we came to learn no one ever came to us and said, do you need to talk? Do you need anything? Is there anything I can help you with? You see, in 1977, you could go to a bookstore, you could go to a library, you could find many articles written by women about their sexual abuse challenges and obviously how to help other women understand and navigate. You could find books, you could find articles. Every now and then you'd get a movie or documentary, you would get an interview by someone, and which would obviously bring into focus the need and the support system that need to be in place for women and girls. But you could not find anything for brothers. In fact, today, the same thing still applies. You can't find anything. There's nothing for brothers. And so you could find programs that women could go to. You could find psychologists and family therapists. But even today, when it comes to brothers and what we deal with, the burden of the guilt and the shame and the need to talk, the need to find some way of dealing with our trauma. Because certainly here in the United States, there are some 44 million adults who are walking around every day that have been victims of child sexual abuse. 1 in 6 of those are boys. So there's a big number of men who have been sexually abused as boys. We're hearing a lot more conversations about men, primarily from celebrities, who are talking about them being sexually abused directly. But no one ever talks about brothers. And so for me, it's what I do, what I talk about in the conversations I look to have is how do we bring brothers into the conversation? How do we elevate the voices of brothers? Because as you said, it's the one group no one ever talks about. No one ever considers needs help. In fact, my oldest sister, like I said, it took 45 years to get to my conversations with them, just out of the fear of not being able to talk because after being told we can't talk about it, from time to time, we've still had family picnics or we still have a family get together, but we would hear the whispers of, how come you didn't hear me weeping? How come you didn't see my tears? But when we're told we can't talk, it's exactly what we do. And to be held to the standard of you can't talk about it, but you are required to talk about your non-participation is one of those paradox moments that shouldn't exist because how can we not talk about it, but then we expect it to answer for not being able to talk about it is difficult.
Yeah.
So I'd look to elevate the voices of brothers and bring us into the conversation so that not only brothers can heal, but the conversation between brothers and sisters can be one of allyship as opposed to what it was for us, kind of like enemies.
Yeah, it's one thing to not talk about it outside your family unit, but not to be able, as a family unit, like figure out how to overcome this hurricane, like you said, or earthquake. That's makes it
Well,
even.
there's trauma everywhere. There's there's absolute trauma everywhere. My sisters have been traumatized for years, and me and my brothers are now in this situation. In fact, me and my older brother, we had already experienced it. And part of the challenge is we're talking about our parents, and these are some of the most powerful, if not the most powerful people we know in our lives. They control and make sure everything. Their job is to keep us safe. Their job is to clothe us. Their job is to feed us. Their job is to make sure no harm comes to us. But these are the people that have been doing the harm. Individually, my brothers and sisters have different relationships with each of them. My relationship with my mother is different from my stepdad, and my older brother is his relationship with them is different with my stepdad, and same thing goes for my sisters. And so you're talking about 8 unique relationships, and obviously 8 unique people, children, who are being asked to navigate trauma that adults typically cannot handle. And yet, here we are trying to figure out the psychological and emotional impact on it and trying to emotionally regulate and try to understand what to do. We spoke to aunts, we spoke to uncles, we spoke to grandparents, and none of them wanted anything to do with it. None of them would come to our help or to our aid. Because certainly back in the 70s, we were still in this era of I'm going to deal with my family, you deal with your family. And my grandparents were very much like that. They're like, well, I'm not going to get involved. You guys handle it. But you're talking about 8 children that are being sexually abused, and no one would come to our aid. And how do we handle that? But for the purposes of my conversation, how do we bring brothers into the conversation? How do we do this? And my thing is, we need to have tools and systems put in place that allow us to deal with our trauma. I've spoken to many psychologists, I've spoken to many family therapists, and to a person, they have told me, I cannot help you. And I am confused. And so I asked why. They said, if you were a woman, Keeper, I could help you. I could help you navigate your child's sexual abuse. But I've never heard a story from a brother's perspective on what happens to them once they learn about it. I don't know what to do for you. And so my brothers and I went years with not only not talking about it, we didn't even talk about it amongst ourselves. And this is what I'm about, elevating the voices of brothers so that the entire family can heal. I am incredibly fortunate, Gypsy, in that I started writing my book in 2013. And by the time I was all done, 3 of my sisters contribute sections to the book. 2 of my brothers I never would have thought that that was even possible, that that could even happen. When I asked them, and I said, I'm going to write a book from a brother's perspective to help brothers understand those who are carrying the burden that they're not alone, and that any sisters or women that read it, they can understand this is what your brothers are going through. They're not being quiet because they want to. They are not participating because they don't care. It's that you told us we can't. And in this situation, we really don't want to intrude because we don't know how to go about it ourselves because there's nothing out there that teaches us how to even approach our sister, let alone deal with our own trauma. So, uh, no books, no movies for brothers out there, no documentaries, no interviews, no nothing. But as I said, we're starting now to see male celebrities talk about their direct challenges, be it politicians or sports figures or actors like Idris Elba or someone like that. But their stories are about their direct um, being directly involved with it. None of it is from how do you deal with brothers who are just alone in this.
Did you ever, I like that your sisters finally collaborated with you on this book. It's really good to get their perspective on it. I was going to ask, at what point did you, I know you couldn't discuss what happened as a kid, but at what point did you guys come together and start talking about this? And did you ever get to talk to your mother about, all of this, even if it's way in the future?
We went through quite a bit. When my sister told us we can't talk about it, that's exactly what we did. And it took me 9 years before I did something about it. You see, on the day that we learned about it, my stepfather faked a heart attack, and my mother got him out of the house immediately before me and my brothers could do anything. And in this shocked state, I'm sure because one of the reasons why they came last was to, okay, we need to do this. They had this plan in place that we need to get you away from the boys. So we're going to have you fake a heart attack to get you out of the house. And so that's what she did. So even at that, there was this sense of, okay, at least he's gone. But 2 weeks later, she brought him back. And we're all trying to figure out what are we doing. It turned out he was working, so we needed his income so we could eat. We had no other means. The house was being paid for by United Artists, but that was it. And so we're trying to figure out what are we doing here? How are we going to do this? And so my mother bringing him back was, without question, a sense of betrayal. And my brothers and I are like, okay, we can look out for our sisters at the very least. We can make sure nothing else happens. But we were wrong. We were absolutely wrong. Without us knowing, it continued. And it continued because my mother told us, I will handle this. I will make sure he's out of the house. I will take care of it. And by the way, I will answer both your questions, but I think this is important.
Yes.
So, first saying that she was going to do that, and our sister said we can't talk about it, and all this is in my book. It is really about my story about what I could have, would have, and should have done, what I ultimately did to bring them retribution and closure. But with my sisters and participating, you get a full family view. Helplessness is not an easy read. It's very dark. It's very gritty. And that's the way it's supposed to be. If people have told me, Keeper, you don't give us a chance to breathe, and my response is, no, you don't get a chance to breathe because my sisters didn't get us a chance to breathe. If you want to know what they went through, if you want to know what brothers are experiencing, what we're thinking about, this is not a People magazine article. This is not a Newsweek article. This is not an Ellen interview or an Oprah interview. This is the real deal. So prepare yourself. But Helplessness is book one of a 3-book series, from helplessness to hopefulness to happiness. I'm writing hopefulness now. How do you get from helplessness to finding hope? So during this 9 years, I will get back to that. So during this 9 years, my mother saying she would handle it was like a warm blanket. It meant I didn't have to do anything. But day by day, I'm feeling the pressure. You have to do something. I know they told you don't do anything, but you have to do something because my self esteem and my self worth is taking a tremendous hit. And when brothers cannot participate, we take a tremendous hit emotionally to the place where we can start to become very, very dark with it. I said it took me 9 years to do something. And the reason why it took 9 years because in 1986 I was going to get married. 3 months before my wedding to my fiance, now my wife of 38 years, I was having a lot of trouble with this. I'm thinking I have got to do something before I get married. My mother's still seeing him from time to time. I cannot have him around my sister. So 3 months before I got married, one evening I told my fiance, I've got to go to the house. My mother's still, the house was still there. So the bedroom that I had when I was younger, when I was there, was still there. I said, I've got to go to the house. I've got to handle something. And my fiance says to me, is everything okay? And I said, yeah, it'll be okay. So you'll be back tonight. I said, no, I'll be back tomorrow. He said, do you want to tell me what it is? I said, no. I had gone to a very dark place. See, there's a lot of talk today about emotional health or mental health, actually. There's a lot of talk about mental health. I think most of our challenges, Gypsy, is not a mental health challenge. I think most of our challenges are emotional health.
Yeah.
Mental health is logic thinking. It is alone. It's isolation. You're all by yourself. You're trying to come up with things. Mental health means that if you need help, a doctor will write you a prescription. It's all your problem. You deal with it. We see a lot of that today. Oh, that person's having mental health challenges. That's just them. You know, they went to a dark place. Well, how did they get there? They got there because their emotional health challenge, that support never arrived. They're emotionally feeling beat down. They're emotionally feeling inadequate. They're emotionally feeling helpless. And that's what was happening with me. I was in an emotional place of just depression and isolation and fear and anger. And I've got to do something. I've got to do something. I cannot let this happen. And so I went from emotional to mental. And that's usually what happens with people. The emotional health challenges come first. And then if that cannot be supported, we go to this mental place, which is very, very dark. And by that time, it could be too late. It could actually be very, very dangerous. So 3 months before the wedding, I had gone to a mental place. I had stopped eating. I started losing weight. I wasn't really communicating with anyone because I was just in my head. I've got to handle this. I've got to handle this. I got to take care of this. So I go to the house. The bedroom that I had is upstairs, 2-story house. There are only 2 bedrooms upstairs. My bedroom, which is right at the top of the landing, get to the top of the stairs. My door is right here to the left. 30 feet down the hall is my mother's bedroom, and she was seeing our stepfather again. So he's in the bedroom with her. I know he's there. I go to my bedroom and I sit in the dark, waiting because I have a plan. I'm getting ready to kill him. That's the plan. Kill him. And my sisters will be okay from that point on. They will never have a worry from that point on. I'm in this really bad mental state. But to kill him, it never even occurred to me until months later. It would have been the worst thing I could do because then my sisters would have said, I never should have said anything. We should have just kept quiet. We should have just let it continue. But I can't let it continue. They can't let it continue. No one's going to help them. That's where I was. So I'm in my bedroom. It's dark. It's a warm summer night. It's a nice, cool, the breeze is kind of cool. And I've got the windows open and it's just blowing, but I am sweating profusely. I am so scared about what I'm about to do. I lie on the bed. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. You can do this. You can do this. And I start imagining what he's doing to my sisters. He's pulled them into a closet. He's closed the door. He unzips his pants and wow. Oh, he brought them into the bedroom. He sits next to them and he starts putting his hands all over them. I'm imagining all of this happening. And that's what happens to brothers. We start to imagine vividly what is going on with our sisters. And there's nothing we can do about it. But tonight, I am doing something. I'm in my bedroom for 2 hours, waiting for a sound, and then I hear it. Breathe. I sit up, place both feet on the bed, on the floor. The bedroom door at the far end of the hall, about 30 feet away, is just open. I stand up, I go to the door, I grab the doorknob, and I pull the door open, and I look, and there he is, all 6'6", 250 pounds, wearing that wig that put his height over 7 feet tall. I think, okay, I can close the door. I don't have to do this. He's so much bigger than me. I'm 5'8". I'm 145 pounds at that time. He could swallow me whole. But I'm a brother. I've got to do something. There's, there's no one for me to talk to. I am doing this. I'm killing him. Because it's upstairs, there's a 3.5 foot wall that overlooks the stairwell. And I've already planned this out. When we meet in the center of the hall, I cannot have my back to the short wall because all he has to do is, and I tumble over, snap my neck at the bottom of the stairs, I'm dead. But I've already determined that my life is forfeit anyway. I didn't care. We live in California. I'm about to commit murder. And so I'm going to be put to death or he's going to kill me. Either way, he's done. So I step outside my door. I have found the courage to at least do that. He sees me, and this big grin comes over his face. Hey, but he sees I am not smiling. I am standing there. I could see comprehension dawning on his face. Something's wrong. Something's about to happen. We start walking toward each other, and we get to the center of the hall. We are face to face, or more accurately, face to chest. I cannot look over his shoulder. That's how much taller he was than me. And whatever light was in the hall, because we were so close to each other, he blacked out all the light. It was like I was so scared. I was so frightened, but I've got to do this for my sisters. I've got to do this for me. I have got to be the brother that they have always wanted. Someone has got to do something. I'm the one. It's happening. Gypsy, I noticed at the last second, my back is to the short wall. It's the last place I needed to be. So I slide over to my left and causes him to slide to his left. And now we are in the center of the hall. My face, as I said, is in his chest. But I look up the side of this mountain and I say, "You have 24 hours to leave this house. If you are still here by this time tomorrow, you will be dead because I will have killed you." I turn around and I walk back to my bedroom and I close the door. The instrument of his death is leaning against the door jamb in my bedroom. It is my favorite baseball bat. That's how I was going to kill him. I was going to beat him to death. I grab the bat and I stand in the middle of my bedroom waiting for him to come through the door. I hear footsteps and I start to shake because I'm nervous. It's about to happen. But I notice the footsteps are fading. He's going the other way. I hear a door close. I go downstairs, I get in my car, which is a Fiat X19, and I drive to my fiance's place. And she asked me, "Is everything okay?" I said, "I won't know until tomorrow." So the next day, I get up and I go back to the house, have my bat with me. As I'm walking up the walkway, I get to the front door and I decide to leave my bat outside because I don't want to agitate a situation that's already agitated. But I'm fully expecting when I open the door to see him standing there with his silver 38 pointing at me. Okay, if he kills me, I'm good, but he's going to jail for murder. My sisters are okay. Stupid, stupid thinking, but I'm a brother who is mentally out of control. I'm in a dark place. I open the door. He's not there. At least he's not standing there. I walk into the living room. It's quiet. I walk through the dining room. It's quiet. I walk through the kitchen. It's quiet. But I do hear a sound at the back of the house. I go back there because my younger brother had a makeshift studio. Open the door, and it's my younger brother at the controls at the he's at the controls of the in the studio. And I asked, is he still here? And he says, "No, he left. So he's gone. I have gotten him out of the house." How did the book come about? Was your question. And have I ever spoken to my mother? The woulda, coulda, shoulda moments, or better yet, my greatest regret in my life is at the wedding. I hadn't spoken to my mother much prior to the wedding, but I wanted to try to have some kind of relationship with her because I fully intended to have kids, which I have two. And I already saw the damage that was done with me and my brothers and sisters not talking. And I felt if I could offer her some kind of olive branch that we could at least talk, and maybe from that we could begin to heal with my sisters and brothers and have conversations around this, then let me do this. So I told my wife, I am my fiance. What I want to do is this. I know how much my mother is all about image. Image is everything to her. And I know she's not going to betray us again, even though she continued to do so. I'm a guy that if I say I'm going to do something, I will give you my word. I will do everything I can to do it. And I usually don't go back on it because I just want to do what I said I was going to do. So I want to give my mother an olive branch. So I go to her about a week before the wedding and I told her, I said, "Okay, look, understand my wife and I do not want him at the wedding." And we hadn't spoken in quite some time. We do not want him. Now, um, if you want to invite him, you can, but no, we do not want him there. So that's me telling her, "Okay, here's an olive branch. Let me do this because I know you're going to do the right thing this time." I know for a fact you're going to do the right thing this time. And now we have something to build on as a family. Her response was, let me get back to you in a couple of days. In that moment, I knew what I had done. He was in our wedding party. She invited him. The brother who got rid of him brought him back. It further fractured my relationship with my sister to the point I thought I would never speak to them again. In 2013, some 45 years later, I decided I'm going to write Helplessness. I have to do something. I do not want my family story to end in tragedy. It must be used to help other brothers and sisters. It must be used to elevate the voices of brothers like myself who are going through the same thing. They need to know they are not alone, and sisters need to know this is what your brothers are carrying. There's a way to heal each other, which we eventually did. But before I write Helplessness, I know I cannot write it, Gypsy, without telling my sisters. There's just no way. I am not going to blindside them.
Mm.
They need to know what's coming. So I called my second sister and I said, I need to talk to you. I want to write a book, but I want to talk to you about it. And she says, okay, come on over. We're standing out in front of her house, in front of her garage. It's a hot summer day. And I tell her what I want to do. I want to write a book from a brother's perspective, what it's like, what our depression and isolation is like, our protective instincts that have been put in check when we want to rage and do something because we have this tremendous need to support you, but you have said we can't do it. But I want to write this book because I think our family story can help other people. Now I'm expecting her to blow up at me. How dare you write this book? You can't talk about it. How dare you? But that's not what she did. She did something unexpected. And I guess time has a way of softening things in people. I'm in tears talking to her because I know I'm hurting her. I'm a mess, but I'm going to do this. She said to me simply this: of course you should write it. All you boys should write it. Write a book. It's not a girl story, it's you boys' story, but you should write it. Men and brothers need to know what you have been going through. I was not expecting that. It completely caught me off guard. She showed me grace and love, compassion, understanding, tolerance. The next day, I called my oldest sister, the one who said, you can't talk about it. I am so scared. I am so frightened to make this call. It's one thing to talk to the other three, but this sister, and I know how she can be, but I've got to go through what I have to go through. That's just the bottom line. In order to get through, I need to go through and let them scream and do everything they need to do. But I'm letting them know this is coming because I don't want other people reading it and then start asking them questions. They're like, what? So I call her. The phone weighs a ton. We have a landline, so I'm using the landline. I pick it up off the main part, and I set the receiver down. I do this for 30 minutes, up, down, up, down, up, down. I'm so scared because there's something more important for me to do. Gypsy, I have got to go outside and watch paint dry on the fence and make sure it dries evenly. That's more important to talking to her. Or I need to go wash some clothes. I need to go do the dishes right now. I need to do everything but talk to her. I get back on the phone the next day. You owe them this. This is what you have to do. So I get her on the phone and I tell her, this is what I'm going to write. Okay, what do you think? Silence. She said nothing. And then she finally says after about a minute, okay, what do you mean, okay? What are you talking about? You're supposed to be raging at me. You're supposed to be, hell on wheels right now. Wrath is supposed to be coming my way. What do you mean, okay? When I talked to both of my sisters, that I actually talked to a third one, a fourth one, we still don't talk to. And I have my two youngest brothers, they're out still navigating their trauma over this. But when I spoke to each of them, I came back a few days later and said, look, it's going to be one thing for me to write the book, but I think it will have greater impact and more importance for everyone, especially sisters, if you write about your experience. Now, that took some balls to do that, to ask them to write something. I said, you can write whatever you want to write. You can rake me over the coals. I don't care. But I think it's going to be real important that other sisters see what you have to say from your experience. All three of them said, okay. Are you serious? It took 45 years for me to find the courage to talk to my sister because I was so scared. My mother, to your question, no. But I did send an email to her, two in fact, and told her I am going to write this book. I think it could be healing for you and certainly healing for us if you could find a way to write something. I don't care what it is. And she said, no. He said, it's not my job to make sure you kids are okay. It's not my job to heal any of the things that I did. Okay. That's your perspective. And so that's how helplessness came about. My sister said, okay. But one of the things that I learned in this entire process, because there were very, very dark days writing this book, is there were some healing things I had to figure out how to do. And one of them was accepting the fact that I'm in pain, that I'm in trauma, because I'm very, in very ways, a very typical guy. I I'm just holding this to myself. Um, I try to be King Kong. I will fight all day, but I'm not going to let you see all this. But that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help me. Women are so much better at navigating their emotions. A lot of that is just because of the societal construct. Women, you're all emotional. You go over there, do this. That's a part of what society has helped create for women. And it is unfair. It is not true. They have as much right to standing in their own space and fighting back as any guy. And by the same token, because of our toxic masculinity of who we are as men, we don't always lock into our emotions because guys are supposed to be strong. Guys are not supposed to have tears and all this sort of stuff. And we pass that on generationally to our children, and our daughters can start to mimic the same things. Well, girls, you're the emotional ones. Boys, you're the strong ones. And it is so ass backwards because both genders have their male and female energy about them. We all have it. And I think women are so much better at it than men because not only do they oftentimes find it more easy to communicate with each other, but it gives them this power that when I need to stand up, I can. And so, guys, when we need to pull back emotionally, we typically don't. So it took me a while to understand, okay, just let it out, let it go. And accepting that I'm in pain. I need to talk to someone. Part of the problem with trauma is that it's like DNA. DNA, which can be self replicating throughout the body, it's constantly self replicating, but it replicates itself in ways we are not aware of that we don't see. Trauma is the same way. It can replicate in ways we are not aware of and that we do not see. And that's what led me to almost killing my stepfather. It replicated from lack of emotional support to a mental health issue that was driving me to murder. And so we have to be very, very careful when we decide not to help someone who's going through something emotionally. See, emotional health is inclusion, it's shared experience, it's community, it's about people coming together and helping each other. And so, one of the things you need to do in order to make sure that you get that kind of support is you have to be willing to talk. You have to be willing to ask someone not only for help, but for me, it was I need to talk. Can I share something with you? And you really have to be careful with the people that you choose. It's an individual or a group, because you don't want someone that is going to constantly interrupt and not let you talk. My sisters, after a lot of our healing process had taken place, one of the things they told me when they wanted to speak to their girlfriends about it, each one had someone they could talk to. Their girlfriends would say, "Girl, I would have done this. Girl, I would have done that." And guys are the same way. And all that is, that's freaking noise, because you don't know what you're going to do in that situation. And so if your response is, "I would have done this, I would have done that," you're not helping. We just need someone we can talk to. And so it's real important that you find that person or persons who you can talk to. Because at the end of the day, Gypsy, I'm of the opinion that men, women, boys, and girls all want the same thing. We all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. We all want to be understood. And we all want to go forward in our lives in a very positive direction. And so, me going forward, which is also cathartic and therapeutic for me, is elevating the voices of brothers in the child sexual abuse conversation when everyone else is talking, when the victims are talking, when the predators are talking, those people who are empowering them are talking. And when they take that momentary pause to exhale, I want brothers to step into that gap and say, listen, we need to be part of the conversation as well. Because brothers and sisters, we can help each other. We can be allies. Not every man is a predator. And not and we go through sexual abuse as well. So that is what I do. That's what I speak about.
Now you've had a lot of time to kind of analyze and dissect this and heal from it. Looking back, what is there anything, would you have handled it differently? And what are some things that you wish was there, tools, resources, community that could have helped you heal a little bit faster?
Your first question is an absolutely brilliant question. Looking back, what would I have done differently? I have thought about that so many times. What I would have done differently. There's a book out by, maybe came out maybe 20 years ago, by Dr. Susan Jeffers, called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. That's what I would have done. I would have gotten to my sisters much earlier. I would have felt the fear. I would have gone through what I needed to go through to talk to them. I would have spoken to my brothers earlier. My brothers and I never talked about this until 10 years ago when I started writing Helplessness. We never talked about it. I had created a podcast on my website, a 13-part series where I finally talked to my older brother. And so people could actually watch the conversation. And then I brought my older brother and one of my twin sisters together, and it was the first time we talked about it. And that particular segment is 2 hours. It's in two parts. But to learn from my sister that I had no idea this is what you boys were going through. I thought you guys just didn't want to talk to us. And I'm like, goodness. She's thinking one thing, but my other sisters are thinking one thing, and my brothers and I are thinking another. And we're all waiting for each other to say something. That's what I would have done differently. I would have talked to them years earlier. Even though they said you cannot talk about it, I would have done it, but I was so immature. I was so scared. I just didn't. And I think that's the big lesson. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Is you figure out the only way through is to go through it, regardless of what they would have said, because I would have felt so much better about myself because I would have taken action. You know, thinking about it, germinating on it, gratitude that everything's okay now without action is empty. And I was empty. So that question, that's the question. That's what I would have done differently. I would have taken the action much, much earlier. My apologies. I forget the second question.
I was asking, what are some things that you wished were there to help support you through this?
Oh, I wish the same sort of things that were there for my sisters were there for me and my brothers. Articles, books. I wish that psychologists and family therapists would have been willing to examine the group left out of the conversation, the brothers, because as whenever I have spoken to a psychologist or something, they tell me, well, we couldn't help you. I even spoke to clergy. I even spoke to preachers, and they said, there's nothing I can do for you. So my response has always been, okay, hold on a second. Let's say I'm in my car with my family, all 10 of us, and we're in an accident, and all 10 of them die. Could you offer me support? Without hesitancy, they all say yes. I said, okay, I have lost my family. I have lost everything I know. Can you help me? No, this is from a brother's perspective. So I wish the conversation would have already existed. But one of the things and I guess it kind of goes back to your earlier question, I wish I didn't have to deal with it. I wish I wasn't sexually abused as a little boy. I wish I didn't learn about my sisters, but what it does, it gives me a much greater perspective, having been a victim and having been a direct victim. That gives me, when I'm talking to people, that kind of, in a really odd way, it gives me greater cachet with the conversation. Because as I said, there'll be a woman invariably, and even family friends, where you can't talk about it. Well, this happened to me. It's like, oh, you do. So that gives me some more credence to what I'm saying. Uh, but I've also examined and thought about, if this hadn't happened to me, if I hadn't written this, if we did not go through this as a family, at what point would the conversation about brothers have ever come up? Because millions of families around the world have gone through this. I mean, the dunghill must be miles and miles tall. But I did not want my family's experience to end in tragedy. I wanted it to end in a way that it could help. And so it's just odd. On the one sense, I wish I hadn't experienced it, but on the other, but in a weird way, like I said, odd way, I'm okay that I did, because it now means I can bring the conversation forward that has not been had.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah. And from the others listening that can use this information, I'm grateful that you decided to come forward and even your siblings putting in their perspective in the book. That's really helpful.
It's been really, really good. There, yeah, I think all of this, it crosses race, it crosses religion, it crosses gender, it crosses political lines, it crosses education, it crosses wealth, it crosses borders, it crosses waters. It happens in every country. And there was nothing brought that to me in a more sharper way than a conversation I had with my father-in-law 5 years ago. He passed away about 3 years ago. Now, my father-in-law, he's white and he's Jewish. He grew up in New York. He had a nice, stable family. He had a good education. He grew up and made something very, very good of himself. As you know, my family is an absolute mess. Like I said, my father-in-law is Jewish. I grew up Baptist. We got all kind of stuff going on. About 4 years ago, not 4 years, about 3 years ago, he calls me, Gypsy, and he says, "I want you to come to the house. I want to talk to you." Okay. I go over to the house. My mother-in-law is not there, which is odd because she's always there. I mean, they're always together, but she's not there. I go and I sit down. He says, "I want you to have a seat here at the dining room table," which is where he's sitting. And I said, "Okay, Dad. What's everything okay? What do you want to talk about?" And I notice my book is in front of him, and he pats the book. And he says, "I want to talk to you about this." Okay. What, did he read it? I'm not expecting him to read it. He says, "I want you to know I understand." I'm thinking, you understand what? "I want you to know I understand what you're going through." And this is my father-in-law. We have a really nice relationship. I mean, we have grown a lot together. And he's telling me, "I understand what you're going through. What are you talking about?" He says, "I'm going to tell you a story that I've only told one person, your mother-in-law. You cannot repeat this story until after I pass away." Okay. What's he about to tell me that I don't already know? He's in his mid 90s. He says, "When I was a little boy, about 15 or 16 years old, we lived in a two-story apartment unit. We were downstairs and our friends were upstairs. We were best friends. Their family and my family, we did everything together. Our families were so close, we never locked the front doors. We could always go in and out of each other's apartments at any time. One day, my mother or my father, I don't know which one, sends me to go upstairs to get something. Go upstairs, open the door to the apartment and walk in, and I don't see anyone. I don't hear anything. Looks around, and then I hear a noise in the bedroom. I walk to the bedroom and I open the door, and the father is molesting my oldest sister. I just stood there for a second, and I turned around and went back downstairs, and I didn't say a word. I didn't say anything. I told no one. When my sister came downstairs, I didn't even talk to her. He's crying at this point. My father-in-law, a guy who, to me, for all intents and purposes, was my dad, is crying. He said it happened again 2 months later, the same thing, and I didn't say anything. Now, here's my father-in-law. He's white and he's Jewish, and he's talking to his black son-in-law. Everything about our lives are different, complete opposite. He didn't call his other two son-in-laws, one who is Jewish and one who is a Catholic, both white. He didn't call them, he called me. And what occurred to me at that moment, Gypsy, was here was a man carrying such a burden. He wanted to unburden himself. He wanted someone to hear him. He wanted someone to say, I understand. It's okay. In his mid 90s, he's still dealing with this. His sister had already passed away some 20 years earlier, but he's still carrying this burden of what he did not do. He is still in trauma because he was unable to find any help for his pain. And it just really brought this whole thing into sharp focus. There are so many men, regardless of their age and religion and all that stuff, that are carrying this burden. And there's so many men who need to talk to their sisters and just sisters and brothers have this conversation. Because ultimately, for brothers, that is our healing. The conversation with our sisters, that is it. We can talk to we can go to therapy. We can do all this other stuff. And I've had other men from movie stars to athletes tell me their story. But ultimately, we want to talk to our sisters because that's where our healing takes place. And so that's what helplessness is about going to the dark place. Hopefulness that I'm writing now is how do you find those people, places, and things that bring you hope and ultimately get to a happy place. You had mentioned earlier, me finding healing. You don't fully heal.
Yeah.
You don't. You
Layer.
find a place, yeah, where you can kind of manage and go forward. But as I said, it's part of your DNA. There is no escaping it. But ultimately, you want to get to a place where you can have relationships because for a brother, and certainly in my case with my younger brothers, if we cannot find the support and the tools, the men we grow to become will directly be related to the support we do or do not get. And how we relate to women and girls will be directly related to the support we do or do not get. Because oftentimes, historically, people have been sexually abused, especially men. We tend to replicate that behavior, which is very, very dangerous. So I look to partner with people who could help me create the tools, who can help me create the systems to bring these sort of things forward so that not only, as I said, men can have their voice and find their healing, but the connection with brothers and sisters can begin.
And I love how you've managed to find a healthy relationship because I know going through any childhood trauma really affects how you grow as an adult, especially if you don't heal from that. And
Absolutely.
you were able
Absolutely.
to find a healthy relationship.
Hmm.
How has all of this affected you? How has going through this as a kid affected your personal growth as an adult?
Well, I will tell you, I had said earlier, this is stuff becomes generational.
Mm,
I realized when I had my son, he's now 34, but when he was in first or second grade, my mother, when she married him, had given us my stepdad's last name. So we were, and I still had a hyphenated name with my wife, who's Catherine. We were Catherine Parent, and I just could not stand that name, Parent. It always just brought about memories for me. And I have got to do something about this name. So when my son is born, he has the last name of Catherine Parent. He brings home a report card in the first or second grade. And I realized every time I saw his name and then the last name, I was getting angry.
mm,
You want to know how this was affecting me? this is part of it. I realized I started to have this negative energy whenever I saw my son's name written down because it had the last name Catherine Parent. And I caught myself one day thinking, oh my goodness, I am handing this energy down to my little boy. What am I doing? So we immediately set about replacing Catherine Parent, which is to Catherine Whitney. Now, Whitney is my mother's maiden name, but my relationship with my with her family has great memories for me. And so that's when we then decided to change the name from Catherine Parent to Catherine Whitney. And I saw that said I was starting to pass down this generational anger, this generational trauma on a 5 or 6 year old boy who was absolutely innocent, like I was with my sisters, innocent. And so that is one of the things that happened is recognizing things that can trigger you. And then what do you do about it? You've got to find a place where you can manage it. I still go through songs from when we sang when we were little, or TV shows or movies, or I will see a commercial now with the family. And there are times I'm just in tears to this day. And I have to get up and leave the room. And my family, they know what's going on. They're like, oh, okay, that got it. Because we don't fully escape it. It's still there. And when we're alone by ourselves and we start replaying things, we all do it. We start beating ourselves up. So one of the things that changed for me was getting back to my three of my sisters, who I now have great relationships with, the three who contributed. The family jokes and the family memories and the great times that we did have together are a constant part of our conversation, and it's healing. It's reconnecting. It really keeps me on a solid foundation emotionally, and I'm incredibly grateful not only for them participating with writing the book, and they will participate in the next two books, but that they found a way to create space for me and allow me to be a part of their life. Because they easily could have just, you're over there, I want nothing to do with you. But we've come a long, long way, and we spend a lot of time with each other now. Um, my mother's still out of the picture. I, there's nothing there for me. Um, I've tried to have conversations with her, but she's not interested, and that's okay. She's going through her own journey.
I'm glad your siblings got to bring it back full circle and help
Hmm.
each other heal with all of this.
Hmm.
Well, thank you, Keeper, for bringing your story and helping others. Is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with before we close it out, where they can find your book, any upcoming projects?
Well, if people want to buy the book, they can get it on Amazon. If they want to reach me, they can reach me at keepercw.author@gmail. I do a lot of speaking, but I would say ultimately, I would, in talking to brothers and men, understand you are not alone. You are not alone. Um, this is a particularly tough topic, but we cannot get the kind of support that we need unless we're willing to talk about it. And so for sisters and women, I hope you find some value out of this conversation and know that your brothers want to talk. I was at an event in 2013. I started writing the book at a Lisa Nichols event, and they brought me on stage to talk about it. And when I sat down afterwards, I was swarmed by so many women who came over to me and said, I had no idea my brother was going through this. I had no idea this is what his challenge is. I should have allowed him to talk to me. I should have done this. there were so many women who came up to me, Gypsy. It got to be overwhelming. I got up and I left the hall and I went outside to catch my breath. And within seconds, the doors burst open and more women surrounded me. But there were three women who left a story with me that has really just kind of pointed out how dark it can get for brothers. These were three separate women who didn't know each other, spoke to me independent of each other. But what they said left a chill with me. All three of them said, I should have talked to my brother. They wanted to talk to me, but I wouldn't allow it. Their guilt became so huge. Their self blame became so huge, even though they knew nothing about it, but they took their lives because of it. That's how dark it can get for brothers. So if you can find the space to allow us to talk, to share a little bit, to build the bridge, you will find that it can be incredibly healing and therapeutic for our sisters. But uh, the bigger, broader part of it is it could go a long way toward helping to heal the family because it's become generational when one doesn't talk to the other, cousins don't talk to each other, nieces and nephews aren't talking to each other. And really, all it takes is a conversation. Is it easy? No. It may require a lot of conversation. But like Susan Jeffers' book said, if you can find the fear and do it anyway, you'll be much better off.
Is there any habits or rituals that you have in moments where you do get triggered? Like you said, there's times where things come up and you get triggered. Are there anything that helps you kind of decompress?
The thing that helps me decompress today, I call my sisters.
Mm-hmm.
My sisters help me. They pull me back, particularly the one who I stood outside her garage. They just let me say what I need to say. And I try to just calm myself when I can't get to them. I just think about what what we used to be when we were happy, we were enjoying good times. Um, I just I just try to take myself back there. And so the people that help me the most are my sisters. And I never thought that would ever happen, but they are my heroes. No question about it. They are the toughest people that I know. And I've seen them navigate their own struggles with this. And I just try to be the brother that they've always wanted. And so that's what I focus on. Try to be a good man, try to be a good dad, try to be a good husband, and have fun in the process.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you for coming on the show. And for the listeners, I'll have Keeper's information in the description to all his books and resources.
Yeah,
Um,
there are resources. There's family counseling, there's group counseling out there, there's family therapy and all that. All those things are readily available. Take the opportunity to investigate and look into those things because oftentimes that's what we need. You may need to find a therapist. You may need to do some things. Oftentimes, insurance plans will pay for those things. So um, that's certainly some of the resources that are available out there.
yeah, and I appreciate you for that. And for the listeners, like I said, we'll have all of this information in the description. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, you can email us at americangypsy@gmail. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Keeper, for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.